Do you think you know the truth about success? Think again. The secret the rich don't want you to know will shake everything you believe in. In the next few minutes, I will reveal information so controversial that large corporations have tried to silence me. This isn't another video about financial tips. It's a wake-up call. What you'll discover here may completely change your life, but it will also make you question every decision you've ever made. I'm about to share something I learned the hard way, something the powers that be would do anything to keep secret. Get ready. After this video, you'll never see the world the same way again. The truth is shocking, and few have the courage to face it. Are you ready for the revelation that will turn your world upside down? The buzz of New York's International Airport was like an urban symphony, a mix of anxious voices, sound announcements, and the soft clatter of suitcases sliding across the polished floor. In the midst of this organized chaos, one figure stood out not for attracting attention, but for his almost palpable serenity. Taylor waited patiently in the first-class line, dressed in a comfy sweatshirt, faded jeans, and low-key sneakers. Her battered backpack hung from one shoulder, contrasting with the designer bags that surrounded it. As other passengers nervously checked their watches or frantically typed into their smartphones, Taylor seemed to absorb every detail around her, as if the airport itself were a sight to behold. A few steps behind, Ethan Caldwell positioned himself as if the world were his private stage. His impeccable Italian suit and gleaming leather shoes practically screamed success. The watch on his wrist probably cost more than many would earn in months. His posture exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance, as if his every step was an affirmation of his status. When his eyes landed on Taylor, Ethan's expression oscillated between surprise and disdain. It was as if her presence in that exclusive line was a personal affront to his worldview. First class, huh? Ethan's voice carried a tone of barely concealed irony. Nowadays, anyone can get an upgrade, right? Taylor turned calmly, her eyes meeting Ethan's. A faint smile played on her lips before she replied, "The world is full of surprises." The answer caught Ethan off guard. He expected embarrassment, perhaps even a hasty explanation. Taylor's serenity momentarily baffled him, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Nothing personal," he continued, unable to contain his curiosity mixed with an almost palpable need to reassert his superiority. "But you don't exactly look like the type who usually travels like that." Taylor just shrugged, her smile never wavering. Appearances can be deceiving. Before Ethan could elaborate his rebuttal, the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Taylor moved forward with the same calm that had characterized her throughout the wait, while Ethan followed her, still intrigued and slightly annoyed by the enigmatic passenger in front of him. Fate, however, had plans to intensify this chance encounter. As they entered the aircraft, Ethan felt his stomach sink as he realized that his seat was right next to Taylor. "You must be kidding," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone around him. Taylor, settling into his seat, gave him another of his serene smiles. "It looks like we're going to be fellow travelers." As he adjusted himself, visibly uncomfortable with the situation, Ethan couldn't help but continue his barely disguised interrogation. "So," he began, his tone oscillating between curiosity and condescension, "what do you do for a living?" Taylor, who at that moment was keeping her backpack under the seat in front of her, replied as matter-of-factly as before, "I work with music." Ethan's eyebrows arched, a mixture of surprise and something that could be interpreted as pity. "Oh, I see. Bars, weddings, that kind of thing." "Something like that," Taylor replied, her tone revealing nothing but a calm acceptance. Ethan let out a low laugh as if sharing a private joke. "Interesting, but you know, some things just aren't for everyone. Like first class, for example." For a moment, Taylor watched him in silence, as if carefully pondering his answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a wisdom that seemed out of place for someone Ethan thought was so common. "I think we're all exactly where we're supposed to be." The answer hung in the air between them, loaded with a meaning that Ethan could not, or perhaps did not want, to fully grasp. The silence that followed was interrupted by the start of the in-flight service, marking only the beginning of a journey that promised to be much more than a simple plane trip. As the aircraft gained altitude, taking Taylor and Ethan into the sky, a silent question hung in the air. How would this unexpected encounter change each of their perspectives on the world and themselves? Onboard service began, bringing with it a new opportunity for Ethan to reassert his position. With an almost theatrical gesture, he made a point of ordering a glass of the most expensive champagne available. His eyes sparkled with an almost childlike satisfaction as he received the bubbly drink. When it was Taylor's turn to make her request, she simply said, "Just water, please." Ethan couldn't contain a laugh of derision. "Water? You're wasting the experience of flying first class." Taylor picked up the bottle the flight attendant handed him and replied as calmly as before, "Sometimes simplicity is enough." That answer made Ethan narrow his eyes, as if trying to decipher a particularly complex riddle, but he soon returned to the charge, insisting on his worldview. "I understand. Some people get used to less. Not everyone was born to enjoy the best that life has to offer." The surrounding passengers began to notice Ethan's provocative tone, casting disapproving glances in his direction. Taylor, however, remained unfazed. After a brief silence, she replied, "Maybe the best is different for each person." The answer clearly did not please Ethan. He tried to disguise his frustration by taking a sip of the champagne, but it was evident that Taylor's serenity bothered him deeply. It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. A flight attendant approached Taylor, speaking in a respectful tone that contrasted with the way Ethan had treated her so far. "Mrs. Swift, the captain has asked to advise you that your connection in London is already confirmed. He also sends greetings." The name Swift echoed through the cabin like thunder on a clear day. Several passengers widened their eyes, and excited murmurs spread quickly. Ethan froze, his champagne glass suspended in the air. "Taylor, Swift," he murmured, incredulity evident in his voice. Taylor nodded politely to the flight attendant and then turned his gaze to Ethan, who now seemed to have seen a ghost. "Something wrong, Ethan?" he asked, with a slight smile on his lips. Ethan opened and closed his mouth several times, but the words seemed to have eluded him. His eyes scanned the cabin, noticing the disapproving looks of the other passengers. Suddenly, he was no longer the confident man who dominated the conversation. He felt exposed, vulnerable. I had no idea," he stuttered, trying to justify himself. "You didn't say who it was." Taylor sighed, her gaze now carrying a mixture of compassion and steadfastness. "I didn't think it was necessary. My name shouldn't change the way you treat people." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan was still really reflecting for the first time since he had boarded. Taylor's words echoed in his mind, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself. How many times had he judged someone by their appearance? How many opportunities for genuine connection had he missed because of his prejudices? How many times had he used his status as armor, keeping others at arm's length? As the flight proceeded, Ethan found himself plunged into thoughts he had never allowed before. He watched Taylor discreetly, noticing how she interacted with the crew and other passengers. There was no arrogance in his demeanor, just a genuine kindness that seemed to touch everyone around him. Meanwhile, a question began to form in the minds of the passengers who witnessed the scene. How could someone as famous and successful as Taylor Swift maintain such humility and grace in the face of provocation? And what could this teach each of them about true success and character? The journey continued, but for Ethan, it was as if the world had stopped. He found himself confronted not only with Taylor's identity, but with something much deeper, the reality of who he himself had become. As the flight neared its destination, the silence between Taylor and Ethan became heavier and heavier. Ethan stared at his own hands, as if in them he could find the answers to the questions that now tormented him. Taylor, for her part, remained serene, alternating between reading a book and watching the landscape through the window. Occasionally, she would cast a discreet glance in Ethan's direction, her expression a mixture of curiosity and understanding. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ethan mustered up the courage to break the silence. His voice, once so full of confidence, now sounded hesitant and vulnerable. I need to apologize," he began, turning to Taylor. "Not because you're famous, but because I was arrogant. I was an idiot." Taylor stared at him, his eyes conveying a wisdom that went beyond his years. "I appreciate your apology, Ethan, but more than that, I hope you learn from this experience." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of those words. "You must think I'm a horrible person," he muttered. Taylor nodded softly. "I don't think you're horrible, Ethan. I think, like all of us, you have room to grow." These words seemed to touch something deep in Ethan. He found himself sharing things he had never said out loud before. "You know, I grew up believing that success was everything, that in order to be someone in life, I needed to look successful all the time. But now, I don't know anymore." Taylor listened attentively without judgment. When he finished, she replied, True success is not in what we flaunt, Ethan. It's in the positive impact we leave on the world and the people around us. As they talked, other passengers listened discreetly. Many found themselves reflecting on their own lives and values. How did they define success? What really mattered in the end? As the plane began its descent, Ethan found himself asking a question he had never imagined asking. How do you do that? How do you keep this humility, even being who you are? Taylor smiled. It's not always easy, but I try to remind myself every day that each person I meet has their own story, dreams, and struggles. No one is lesser or less important just because they are not famous or rich. These words reverberated not only in Ethan, but in all who heard them. It was a powerful reminder of the shared humanity that unites everyone, regardless of status or fame. When the plane finally landed and the passengers began to stand up, Ethan realized that something fundamental had changed inside him. He watched as Taylor was approached by some fans at the terminal, noting how she treated each one with genuine attention and affection. Standing in the distance, Ethan reflected on how a simple flight had turned into a journey of self-discovery. He wondered what his life would be like from then on. Would you be able to keep the lessons learned, or would you go back to old habits once you returned to your routine? And you, dear friend, have you ever had an experience that completely changed your perspective on life? How do you define success and personal value? Months had passed since that fateful flight, but the memories remained vivid in Ethan's mind. Taylor's words echoed in his thoughts at the most unexpected moments, serving as a constant reminder of the lesson he had learned. On a sunny afternoon, Ethan was again at an airport, this time in Chicago. He wore a suit as always, but something in his posture had changed. His eyes, once focused only on himself, now watched the people around him with a new attention. While waiting in the boarding line, Ethan noticed a young man next to him. The young man wore simple clothes and seemed a little nervous, repeatedly consulting his note. At another time, Ethan would have completely ignored his presence. Today, however, something has impelled him to act differently. "First time flying?" asked Ethan with a gentle smile. The young man, surprised by the friendly approach, nodded. "Is it that obvious?" Ethan laughed softly. "Only for those who have already been in your shoes. Don't worry, everything will be fine." In the minutes that followed, Ethan found himself engaged in a lively conversation with the boy named Alex. She found out that he was on his way to a job interview, the first big opportunity of his life. "You know," Ethan said, as they made their way to the plane, "a few months ago, I probably wouldn't have even noticed you. It's strange to think about it now." Alex looked at him, curious. "What has changed?" Ethan smiled, remembering that day with Taylor. "Let's say I had a lesson in humility from someone very special. I learned that a person's true value is not in what they wear or how much money they have in the bank." As they settled into their seats, which coincidentally were side by side, Ethan found himself sharing the story of his encounter with Taylor Swift. Alex listened intently, his eyes widening as the narrative unfolded. "Wow," Alex exclaimed when Ethan finished. "It's amazing how one date can change everything, isn't it?" Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "The most incredible thing is how this change continues to reverberate. Every day is an opportunity to do differently, to be better." During the flight, Ethan found himself giving Alex tips about the interview, sharing experiences, and offering words of encouragement. He realized that in helping the young man, he felt a satisfaction that none of his old successes had provided. As the plane landed at its destination, Alex turned to Ethan with a genuine smile. "Thank you for everything. You can't imagine how much it meant to me." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "Actually, Alex, I think you helped me as much as I helped you. Thank you for reminding me of what really matters." As they said goodbye at the terminal, Ethan watched Alex walk away, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude. He pulled out his phone and, after a moment of hesitation, opened his playlist. Taylor Swift's soft voice filled her ears, bringing with her all the memories and lessons of that transformative day. As he walked to the airport exit, Ethan reflected on how a single interaction could change the course of a life. He had entered that first flight as one person and left as a completely different person. And now, months later, he realized that the real journey was just beginning. Ethan's story reminds us that personal growth is an ongoing journey. Every interaction, every encounter, carries the potential to transform us, to make us question our beliefs, and to expand our understanding of the world and ourselves. And you, dear friend? What unexpected encounters shaped your journey? How have you applied the lessons learned in your daily life? Remember, every day is a new opportunity to make a difference, to be the change we want to see in the world. May Ethan and Taylor's story serve as a reminder that true greatness is not in the titles we bear or the possessions we accumulate, but in the way we treat others and the positive impact we leave on each life we touch.